Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and today was the United States Grand Prix from Austin, Texas, hence the cowboy hat. And this was actually a really good race. I know I said on Friday that the COTA track I didn't think was a great track for single-seaters. This was a fun race, especially the ending, although there were things that disappointed me. And it's stuff we've covered before, but I'll go over it again. But I'd like to start with something else. Lewis Hamilton. Is he completely washed up yet? Can we all just admit that? There's a lot of young drivers coming through right now. Liam Lawson, Franco Colapinto in this race were absolutely fantastic, deserved point scorers. Lewis Hamilton crashed out on lap 2. He didn't qualify well. He's not been amazing all year. I know he's taken a couple of wins and he's had high points, but generally he qualifies between like 5th and 8th, kind of where you'd expect the Mercedes to be, but he's been lagging behind George Russell here and there, and I don't think George Russell's had a great year. It's not been I just think it's time to admit Lewis Hamilton has passed his peak. He's definitely not in his prime anymore. I do think Ferrari have made a really bad choice. Now, I know Lewis Hamilton has value outside of just being a good race driver. He has a lot of social media followers and there's a lot of recognition that comes with that and brands, and I'm sure you'll see some kind of crossover between X44 and Scuderia Ferrari, and it'll be ridiculously expensive and probably looks terrible. Not that I know anything about fashion. I'm wearing a Marussia top from 2015 and a cowboy hat. But I think if you look at the current Ferrari driver pair up, Leclerc, Sainz, there's respect there. They work well together. 1-2 here in America. Both have been getting decent results all year. This has a partnership potential way above what Leclerc and Hamilton will offer. And I think Ferrari are throwing away a solid duo for a star name. That would have been a good signing 10 years ago. Not necessarily now. In fact, even like 5 years ago. Lewis Hamilton, I honestly think he should have retired after 2020. He won that championship. It was all downhill from there. And even though, as I said, this is his best year really since 2021, I guess. I know he finished third in the championship last year, but I wasn't really that impressed by him at any point. He was never in championship contention, not that anyone really was. But this year, even with the high points, there's been a lot of low points. I'm pretty sure Lewis Hamilton has only retired from something like 13 races in his entire time with Mercedes. And yet, spinning out on the second lap at COTA, it feels like something that Lewis Hamilton from 2009, 2010 would have done. And I do just think he's past his peak performance. It happens to everyone. I don't think Fernando Alonso's as good now as he was 20 years ago, but it's not to say he doesn't have worth. And I know Lewis Hamilton has a lot of worth, especially to someone like Ferrari. But I just look at their current pairing. I honestly think 2025 is going to be a bit of a downgrade for Ferrari, and you're looking at them now fighting for second in the Constructors' Championship with Red Bull, still able to catch McLaren really if they have a really good run into the end to the season. Honestly, I think they're throwing that away for just a star name from yesteryear. And honestly, there's no space on the grid for Franco Colapinto at the moment. I know he's been linked with the other Sauber seat because his performances have been so good since he turned up. 4 races, he's finished 12th, 11th, 10th and 8th. That's brilliant. He's actually pretty much on the same points as Esteban Ocon for the year, which shows you how bad the Alpines have been. Honestly, Franco Colapinto is a revelation. He is brilliant. Liam Lawson, fantastic driver. He looks great. Sergio Perez, another tough weekend where he just did not really perform. He was not really in contention in the sprint race. He didn't do well in sprint race qualifying. He was kind of just there in the race. I know he scored decent points in the end. He was still last of all the top teams. He got passed by George Russell, who started in the pit lane. There was a point in this race where Sergio Perez wasn't that far ahead of Liam Lawson, who started way behind him. And that's got to be a sign. Someone at Red Bull's got to see that and go, this Liam Lawson kid's looking pretty good. We should get him in that Red Bull. If not, Yuki Tsunoda is also doing a really good job. I know he didn't score points here. He had a spin. It wasn't a great race. But I think Yuki Tsunoda has done a great job this year. He'd be worth a shout in a Red Bull, even if it's just for a season and it doesn't work out and you replace him with Liam Lawson. Why not? Because, honestly, Sergio Perez is not helping your cause. You are going to lose this Constructors' title because you've hung on to Sergio Perez even when he wasn't performing. Even when you had the opportunity to get rid of him, you gave him a new contract. That was a mistake. There's so many good young drivers coming up. There's drivers from Formula 2 who have missed out on seats. We have not seen Felipe Drugovich in a Formula 1 car yet. And we really should, because he is a very good driver. You have Mick Schumacher, who was only given a season and a half, 2 seasons at Haas. There's drivers like Gabriel Bortoleto, Isaac Hadjar, Frederic Vesti. Great drivers who may never see a Formula 1 seat. I know, again, Bortoleto and Hadjar are being linked with seats. Hadjar will probably be driving an RB in a couple of years' time. They're great drivers, but a lot of them do miss out. Zane Maloney is going to Formula E. We've seen the likes of Callum Ilott go to IndyCar because they can't get a Formula 1 seat. Great drivers, all of them. Christian Lundgaard, another great driver who's gone to IndyCar because he can't get a Formula 1 seat. Teo Pucher, yes, he's kind of screwed up this year. He's still a good driver and he deserves a Formula 1 seat. And he probably will never get one now. It's a shame because you've got people like Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, you had Daniel Ricciardo at the start of the year. Drivers who've been there a long time aren't exactly performing the way they used to, but just can't step away. And it would help Formula 1 a lot if they did. Back to this race. Ferrari, absolutely fantastic. Strategy was spot on. They had the pace. Great drive from both drivers. Sainz didn't catch Leclerc, but it was still a great 1-2 for them. Helps them in the Constructors to catch up with Red Bull, even catch up with McLaren a little bit. It really was top result from Ferrari this weekend. Red Bull, Max Verstappen won't be unhappy with third. Okay, he got it because Norris got a penalty. Was it a fair penalty? Probably. It was a bit of a lunge. I don't think it was really on. He should have given the place back. It's a costly mistake because it means Norris has lost ground to Verstappen, even though it's only a little bit. It's one race less to score points on him to be champion. It's probably not going to happen. He has to have a big swing. Basically, he needs to win and Verstappen retire at one of the races coming up. And Verstappen doesn't retire often. So it's hard to see that happening, but this year has been kind of crazy. Maybe it will. Oscar Piastri, in the last few races, he's kind of just been there and not really been hungry levels of good. He's still putting in a performance and getting decent points from McLaren, which is what's necessary. And with Perez not scoring much for Red Bull, it's enough to keep McLaren right up there. But I was happy seeing him challenge for wins with Norris as well. McLaren did not have it their own way. They're off the pace a little bit. And that's a shame because they have been such a top team. Again, the start for Norris was not great. He got bullied in the first corner, really, by Verstappen and the Ferraris. And that cost him victory here. But McLaren did have the pace. They are still looking the fastest team overall. But in this race, it just did not work out for them. Mercedes, I think it's a poor weekend. Both Russell and Hamilton obviously did not have a good qualifying session. They've missed out on points here. I think if you look back at practice and sprint race qualifying and even the sprint race, Russell looked like he had a lot of pace in that car and it just never really materialised. Hamilton, it was kind of a mid-weekend anyway. He had some kind of issue in sprint race where I think he said something about his brakes, but he had grading on his tyres as well. He just had no pace. He could not keep up with the top 5 cars. So it's had pretty much a nothing weekend for Mercedes, but they're kind of adrift of everyone anyway. They're way behind McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari, but they're way ahead of everyone else. So they're kind of just stuck in 4th. And honestly, that's where they're going to be for the rest of this year. I don't see any big jumps coming. I imagine they've turned entirely to the 2025 car, give up on this season because it's not been a disaster, but it's not really anything worth looking back on other than the few wins they have taken. As for everyone else, outside of Hulkenberg, Colapinto, and Lawson scoring points, which is a fantastic job for them, it's pretty much the usual for everyone else. Tsunoda, honestly, this was not a good weekend for him, but he did qualify okay, and he was running in the top 10 at the start of the race. So it shows he can be there. Hulkenberg and Magnussen for Haas, brilliant job. What a turnaround for Haas it's been this year. They have been incredible since getting rid of Gunther Steiner. I think a lot of people doubted it was going to work. And I can't remember the name of the chap they replaced Gunther Steiner with, but he's done a hell of a job, and Haas look in a much stronger place now than they have for years. And they've just announced a partnership with Toyota as well. And Toyota are pretty much everywhere. They have cars in almost every series apart from Formula One. Even if they have no interest of getting back into Formula One, and it doesn't look like they do, there's still a lot of expertise Haas can call on from them. So that's going to be an interesting partnership going forward. It's going to be interesting to see how that works because obviously Haas are also technical partners with Ferrari. So it's kind of this weird Ferrari-Toyota in bed with each other situation. And I'm interested to see where that goes. I don't think it's going to lead to Toyota going back to Formula One. But you can never say never. I think Toyota gave it a really good go the first time. It wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility of them coming back. I don't think it'll be in the near future, though. Everyone else, Alpine, they were running in the points. Gasly looked quick, but the race just did not work their way. And honestly, that's kind of been the story for Alpine all season. Their paint livery for this race was absolutely atrocious. I don't know why they decided to try and look like the McLaren. It was more annoying than anything. But they are just a nothing team this year. As I said, Esteban Ocon's got 5 points, the same as Franco Colapinto. It has been a truly awful year for the French team. And with all the arguments going off about their engines and Renault not wanting to be there anymore, really. I think that's the situation. Renault aren't interested anymore. They don't want to make the engines. It's too expensive, so we'll just stick Mercedes engines in it, which is great. We've now only got 2 different engines or 3 engines on the grid. It's a mess. And I think for Alpine, it's a very, very sorry situation. Hopefully it improves next year because they've got Jack Doohan coming up, and I think he's a great driver. I'm excited to see what he can do in Formula One. And again, Alpine have a lot of decent drivers standing by. Victor Martins, he's crashed a lot this year in Formula 2. It's not gone his way, but he is a great driver. Sauber, honestly, not worth mentioning. Pretty rubbish as always. They've scored no points, and it looks like that's going to be the case all year. I doubt they're even bothering with this car. It'll be interesting to see what they do next year with Hulkenberg and the so far unannounced seat, the only one I think left for 2025, unless there's changes elsewhere. But honestly, if they can get Franco Colapinto, do it. He's a great driver. I don't think he'll help you score points, though. I don't think you're going to miss Bottas. He literally seems like he's given up. So, again, nothing weekend from Stake, Sauber, whatever you want to call them. Williams, as I said, Franco Colapinto, fantastic job. Alexander Albon, he's been a little bit disappointing over the last few races. And this was a bit of a messy one. He had contact with Ocon at the start and then never really appeared. I don't even remember seeing him on screens at all. Magnussen, I don't think I talked about Magnussen. He looked like he had pace, and I don't know what his issue was, but he had to come into the pits. So he lost out on points as well. But it's still a good drive. I think that's everyone. I honestly cannot remember what teams are on the Formula 1 grid half the time. Aston Martin. I forgot about Aston Martin, but can you blame me? They were very forgettable once again. Again, I think they've given up on this car entirely and are focusing on next year. I don't think you'll see Alonso or Stroll in the points again in 2024 unless others retire. And actually, that is one thing I would say. Hamilton was the only retirement from this race. I would have thought at this point in the season we'd start to see more cars break down. So it looks like they've got reliability nailed, which is a good thing, I guess. But I'll talk about the main controversy of this race is Verstappen and Norris. Did Norris deserve that 5-second penalty that cost him third place ahead of Verstappen? Yeah, probably. As I said, it was a bit of a lunge. I don't think he was really ahead at the apex. They both went off the track. It was just messy. But again, as I've said before, there's a way to get rid of this problem. Instead of runoff, have something that slows the cars down. And then they won't want to go out there. Gravel, grass, turf, anything. Those weird wiggly lines they have at Paul Ricard that slow cars down, apparently. Just something that makes it so the driver will do anything to not go out there. And there you go, problem solved. They won't go out there. I'm not saying put a barrier around the circuit and turn it into a street circuit, because honestly, if you do that at every track, it gets tiring, and it honestly means that the street circuits they do have would kind of lose all value because they're kind of meant to be freaks. But I honestly, there has to be something better than just lines and time penalties, because it gets on my nerves every freaking race. We have to go through this charade of penalties, and always he got a 5-second penalty, always had 4 warnings, he might get a penalty. You can get rid of all that just by doing something. Something around the track that stops cars wanting to go out there, stops cars being able to get an advantage by going wide. Anything. Use your imagination. You can do it with fans. Just stick a bunch of people out there and tell drivers not to drive into them. I'm sure it will go fine. I don't do that. Next race, I think, is next week or the week after. I've kind of lost the will to live with Formula 1. There are so many races this year. 16 to 18 races is the perfect length for a Formula 1 calendar. I've been up since 5 a.m. because I watched the Super GT live, which was fantastic, by the way. I'd highly recommend watching Super GT from Autopolis. It was a great race. European Le Mans as well was also fantastic this weekend. The World Rally Championship in Central Europe, that has been really good. I don't know, what else have I watched? Euro Formula was a bit of a drag. But then, it's Euro Formula. Were you surprised? TCR World Tour from China was okay. Worth watching. It's free on YouTube. Why not? There's lots of stuff that's free on YouTube you could watch. Doesn't have to be Formula 1 all the time. But I choose to anyway. So, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you enjoy this one? What do you think of the controversy with Norris and Verstappen? What about Ferrari just running away with this one? What about Lewis Hamilton crashing? Let me know your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more motorsport content. As always, there will be videos constantly throughout the week. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing, and have a good one.